Hello, and welcome to another Pender Ventures podcast. I am Cheri Corbett, partner with Pender Ventures, and I'm kicking off today a new Founder Series. My first guest is Derrick Emsley, CEO of Veritree, an investment of ours we closed on in late 2024. So Pender Ventures is a venture capital investor focused on health tech and B2B technology companies at the inflection point between commercialization and scale. We are a team of hands-on, high-conviction investors who partner closely with founders to accelerate growth and build category-leading businesses. So my guest today, Derrick Emsley, serves as the co-founder and CEO of both Tentree and Veritree. From a young age, Derrick has been actively involved in environmental stewardship. At 16, he founded a tree planting company that sold carbon credits to businesses, a venture that saw over $1 million in contracts and planted 150,000 trees. This venture helped pave the way to the founding of Tentree, a lifestyle brand that plants 10 trees for every product sold. Today, Tentree has set new standards in the sustainability apparel world, sold tens of millions of units, and contributed to the planting of well over 100 million trees. It's incredible. So in 2021, Derrick launched Veritree, a technology platform purpose-built to verify, report, and monitor global reforestation projects, aiming to set a new standard of restoration.
This podcast is for information purposes only. It should not be viewed as investment advice or as an offer to buy or sell Pender's funds. Our funds are not guaranteed, and any discussion of past performance is not an indicator of future results. Any opinions expressed are as of the date of this podcast and are subject to change. Pender may not necessarily share the opinions of our podcast guests. More important information can be found on our website, penderfund.com/disclaimer.
Collectively, Derrick's businesses are now supporting the planting of over 100 million trees per year and on pace to plant over 1 billion trees by 2030. So welcome, Derrick.
Thanks, Cheri. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, so we're excited to hear all about Veritree and your journey. So maybe to set the stage here for the audience, could you please give us a little bit of background about your journey as a founder, starting with Tentree and then Veritree, along with a brief description of what each company does?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you outlined a fair amount of it in kind of the introduction, but effectively, my journey from an entrepreneurship standpoint has kind of been always in and around the world of reforestation or nature. My first business was called Greenfield Carbon Offsetters. We bought a square mile of farmland, planted trees on it with the idea of selling carbon offsets. And while it was a really amazing experience, the approach to funding reforestation or afforestation at the time wasn't really viable. And so what we fell in love with was tree planting. That was what we wanted to be a part of. We just needed a different way to fund it. And so that led to us creating Tentree to act as a vehicle. And really the idea and the premise being connect consumers with trees. And we were really agnostic at the end of the day as to how we connected those customers. We just knew we wanted to build a consumer brand. We stumbled into the world of apparel, and it just turned out to be a really, I think, amazing vehicle. The idea being for every product we'd sell, we'd use the profits to fund tree planting. We've funded millions and millions of dollars worth of reforestation through the sales of those clothes. We've tried to build a really sustainable, both supply chain, the products we're making, really live into the ethos of protect the world you play in. And, it's been an amazing journey of just seeing the excitement of people get around reforestation. And Veritree really came to be more in the last 5 or 6 years as we were funding more and more reforestation. We just realized that the numbers were getting bigger, the dollars were getting bigger, and we needed to really stand behind the verification and the accountability of the work that we said was happening. I mean, it's in the name, Tentree. And so we built a platform to allow us to verify that tree planting, to audit the tree going in the ground, make sure it survived, make sure it could be monitored, ensure like earlier stage was the right tree, right place, right time. And that tool ended up becoming Veritree. And it was never really intended to be its own business, but we started getting approached by other companies that were funding reforestation for a variety of reasons. And they said, we're facing the same problem. And, frankly, it's a big problem across the nature-based space of verification, auditability, and transparency. And so we spun Veritree out in 2022, and here we are today. Now it's a platform that's helping other businesses to invest in restoration and building the tooling to really elevate restoration as a whole all across the globe.
It's fantastic. And I know just in general, like greenwashing and all that has become such a big issue and concern globally. Are the dollars that we're spending actually going towards something that they're supposed to be going towards in the right way? And so the verification is really important for a lot of people. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that across the board with anything to do with the, philanthropy, sustainability, ESG, like whatever sort of, category you want to place it in. I think the real core point is that when organizations or people put dollars to work and they believe an outcome will happen, they want to actually see it and they want to know that it actually had that impact. And tree planting is no different. Nature-based solutions are no different. So I think you're seeing that all across the board.
So what drew you to your entrepreneurial journey?
I mean, for us, we started, our first business was when I was 15 or 16. So it was pretty early. I think I was fortunate. My brother and I, we grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My dad had started a variety of different businesses, and, he'd always kind of pushed us to, start something. And, the other piece is that our founding team, like we grew up in the prairies. And so, there's this like incredible sort of support system we found in the prairies for people that were trying to build things and trying to do something a little bit different. And, building particularly an apparel company that plants trees, that was something that was pretty unique in the prairies. And it was just an amazing place to start and an amazing place to build.
And it was Regina specifically, correct? In Saskatchewan?
Regina, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, there's not a lot of major apparel brands built out of Regina, so it's pretty.
Not a lot of major apparel brands, not a lot of trees either. So
not a lot of trees, yeah, a whole lot of grain, but that's about it.
Yeah,
no, that's fantastic. So I've we're investors in Veritree, and that is the focus of this podcast. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about Veritree specifically, what it does, how you've grown it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think the way to think about Veritree, it starts from the standpoint of like really what was the problem we were looking to solve. So the problem we experienced was that Tentree was funding reforestation and couldn't verify that it was actually happening. Where did the tree get planted? Did anybody else claim it? Did it survive? Was the right tree right place? All these kind of questions were really challenging to answer, even in a small way. And it became even more challenging when you get to the scale that we were talking about, millions of trees a year. And so really there's all these problems around that idea of the tree being planted and us funding the tree and wanting to know, did that work really happen? And so we started to build tools to fix that. And I think like our view of where the problem was actually pretty myopic at the beginning. We said, okay, let's figure out a way to ensure that you can get data on the tree, make sure it's not double counted, and really be able to go back to that same spot and look at that tree again. So that was kind of like the starting point. But what we realized was in the sort of broader issues of nature and restoration was like, that's the middle of the problem set. To get there, you actually need to go earlier and say, how do you evaluate the area that's being restored? How do you make sure that it's the right tree for that area? How do you make sure that, that land actually needs to be restored? And how do you actually get to the point of when that tree goes in the ground, all the work up front has been done appropriately? And then you get to the point of the tree's been planted. How do you actually go, not just for the next, call it 3 to 6 months to say, did it survive? How are you monitoring these things for 1, 2, 5, 25 years thereafter? And so we started with this relatively narrow problem set and expanded quite a bit. And the tooling around that problem set is what we call a tree RP. It's effectively an ERP for large scale reforestation efforts to audit and verify and manage that work, help you inventory or kind of like tokenize every individual impact, not just the tree, but the carbon, the biodiversity, the socioeconomic impacts, everything sort of the halo around this. And so that was really the core problem set and like really the core focus of the tooling. The way that we built a business around it, though, and why it actually became a company in its own right, was because there were companies that were funding reforestation and had this same problem. There are organizations, large Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies that are funding these projects, and they're saying, we have that same problem. And so they started to approach us to say, can we use your technology? We want to fund restoration. Can you act as our digital monitoring and reporting platform? Can we actually leverage Veritree's existing relationships? Can we have Veritree come in as call it verification as a service layer? So at its core, the way the business operates is we sort of operate in the middle of this kind of nexus of the demand for restoration or nature-based solutions and the supply. And our system, it really serves to act as that connective tissue that both connects both sides of that market, but also elevates the end product too.
Amazing. And so how are you different? There must be something else out there that's similar. How are you different to your competitors?
We get asked that question a lot. And I think the unique part about what we're building is that it really comes down to where we tackled the problem from. And we tackled it from the problem of being, the business that was funding these projects and facing these issues. And so our approach to solving it is quite unique in the overall space. When you look at the call it, network of solutions out there for things like digital MRV tech, like digital monitoring, reporting, verification tech. There's geospatial platforms, there's, carbon models, there's, form-based data collection apps, there's a variety of different tools. None of them are custom built for this solution. A lot of them end up being sort of used for, so one of them might be kind of jerry-rigged to be used for a specific use case, but it's never really custom or purpose-built for the solutions of restoration. And then on the demand side, like supporting call it, the Tentrees of the world that are funding this work, they're often left to kind of get like a Google photo album or, maybe a certificate. So the actual portal of like reporting that we're able to provide to customers is super unique. So I would say that if you look at the kind of from project design through to implementation, verification, monitoring, and reporting, through to the end customer, we're solving or working to solve that entire sort of that entire workflow. That is a unique use case in the space. There's a lot of individual solutions along that journey that we actually work with, we partner with in a lot of cases, a lot of geospatial models we've partnered with, a lot of sensor tech for different ground-based things we've partnered with. But the synthesis, management of all that data and the connective tissue is really unique in the space.
Amazing. And so how would you describe Veritree's vision, and where is that vision taking you next?
I mean, our vision is to really bring trust back to impact. At its core, we want to build the infrastructure for trust in impact. And where we're focused today is in the nature-based space. And even within the nature-based space, where we're focused is in the restoration and the reforestation space. And part of the reason for that is because that's the world we came from. That's the space we knew. And it's also a pretty sizable chunk of what we think the overall opportunity is within this. But really at its core, we're trying to bring trust back to impact. And that impact goes far beyond just trees in the ground. that's the input, but there's the outcomes too, things like carbon and biodiversity and so much more. And then there's so many other things that we are working on that are components of these projects that go on for the long term. Things like rolling out beehives, things like supporting clean water, things like supporting with infrastructure around the projects to make them sustainable long term, that we're monitoring and verifying through our platform, that are kind of opening up all these additional areas of opportunity for us, where we believe that as a whole there is so much waste taking place in the, call it, impact space, that with better technology, verification, auditability, it will actually grow the overall pie for everybody.
Amazing. Thank you. And so, thinking about your experience from Tentree, what have you learned from that journey, and what have you been able to support from that learning in Veritree?
We have learned a ton. I would say that one thing that has really benefited us as we built Veritree is everything we learned around storytelling. From when we were building Tentree, you're building a D2C or a B2C business. So you're talking to the end consumer, and the marketing and the sort of, opportunities that we identified within the customer journey to really use the reforestation and nature-based messaging to change consumer behavior. All of those learnings have been invaluable to us now that we're on the B2B side. And companies ask us, they say, well, why should I do this? We have so many examples and proven case studies that we implemented for how to use reforestation in a way that creates value for the business, for the consumer, and really just taking everything we learned from the storytelling standpoint and really injecting that. I would say, like, from my perspective, building Tentree first as a B2C business and taking some of that best in class understanding of how to connect with the consumer and create value for the business through doing that has been really invaluable to us in the space where we're working with these companies that are asking the question of, like, I want to do it, but give me a reason to, give me more justification.
So I'm hearing both storytelling as well as lived experience. Like, you've been the customer essentially, right? When you were trying to do this on the Tentree side, and then you've lived it in those shoes. And so to be able to share that with your now customers sounds like it was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tactically, there's so many things that we learned as well at Tentree that we brought to Veritree. I think one of the biggest mistakes we often made was, just not making decisions fast enough. Not treating decisions as two-way doors early on, thinking everything was existential from a business, when in reality, our ability to win with Veritree is by learning faster, not by making the right decision. It's like the quantity of decisions we can make that we can continue to iterate and improve on, and just really embedding the approach of speed, excellence, of iteration, and really focusing on that. There's so many also like tactical sort of founder learnings that we were able to take from our time at Tentree that have allowed us to really accelerate faster.
Would you say the speed of that decision making has been the hardest change maybe in scaling a tech platform as opposed to the retail business, or do you think there's something else that's been harder?
No, I think the speed has been the easy part. The speed has been like we extracted that learning, and it's been kind of a fundamental principle with how we built the business since day one. I think the thing that we have had to learn, Veritree at its core, this idea of like building infrastructure, that involves a different sort of thoughtfulness within, and this is software as a whole. Like when you're building software, you're really trying to build You're trying to be incredibly thoughtful about workflows. You're trying to be incredibly thoughtful about, not just building it 1,000 times to be used once, which in some cases, when you're building a new T-shirt for a new season of product, you're not necessarily thinking that way of like, this T-shirt needs to be on the shelf for the next 10 years. Whereas with software, you're thinking a lot differently. I think that's probably been the most not necessarily challenging, but definitely like the biggest leap for us from a leadership standpoint and how we manage our day to day.
So when you talk to your peers in the industry, so whether in retail or in other technology companies, do you think there's much difference in your approach to your businesses given the impact side of what you do?
Not really. No, I think at its core, I think in general, and I know this is the case when you're an investor, is there's a lot of pattern matching that you try to do. And I think as founders, we also try to do that. We try to understand, okay, what we're building, what are patterns that we can learn from, whether it be industries, whether it be like business model types and that sort of thing. At its core, really like Veritree, where a lot of the challenges come for us is that we're trying to build some of this like infrastructure and call it like category definition software in a space that's just still forming in a lot of ways. But you could say the same thing about anybody that's building an AI specific tool, is like the platforms and the softwares are changing every 6 months. And so for us, it's really like, I would say that it's not that what we're building is dramatically different because we're in the impact space. There's real world challenges that come with working within, groups all across the world that have very little Wi-Fi, low income, and some of these like international reforestation projects that create challenges. But the core challenges of building a software in an evolving market that with dynamic customers and trying to create value, that's pretty standard, I'd say, for most software businesses at this stage.
I think that's fair, for sure. So shifting gears here a little bit, I heard that you use the Rockefeller habits in your business. So would you mind explaining for our listeners today what those are and how you use them?
For us, the Rockefeller habits, it's something I think I read when I was like back in university, and we've kind of implemented in a variety of different ways. And I think with any of these systems, you kind of take what you like, you leave off what you don't, you kind of pull in other things. Like there's a bit of Rockefeller, a bit of OKR, a bit of like EOS. There's all these sorts of things that, you end up figuring out what works for you. The thing that I liked about Rockefeller is the framework's really, the idea behind it, it's about scaling with clarity. And it's the understanding that as the business grows, the tactical advantage we have against bigger companies is our ability to scale faster. And the way we scale faster is better clarity and understanding and, alignment within the organization. So it really, what I like about it is it helps us frame kind of like the top down as well as bottom up of the business so that everybody's aligned at all times. And so for us, it's, it really helps us run the rhythm of our business. It's our annual planning. It's our quarterly planning. This is the first year we're going to get back into a 3-year planning cycle. Back in 2023, we did our first 3-year plan, and this is the final year of it. And then it's really interesting to see all our financial and strategic goals for 2026 that we set out in 2023 haven't changed a word or a number from them. And seeing how our annual goals have evolved and changed. And we've created this strategic blueprint, which is this one page that outlines all of it. And so we love it internally because I think it just allows us to scale clarity within the team and really build a rhythm around execution.
So going from now 2026 to 2029, do you see it changing? Like, how do you see the organization kind of growing for the next 3 years?
Yeah, quite a bit. When we did the 2020 3-year plan. It was the end of 2023. And, we were 20 people. We're now 80, 85. And probably by the end of this year, we could be north of 100. And the business is, I think, over 500% bigger than it was then. And so, but what's interesting is a lot of the core strategies that we felt we needed to do and execute on have remained true. One of the things we talked about back then was this idea of ingredient branding, like kind of becoming the Kleenex of tree planting, like creating a category around verified trees so that, the world of tree planting is one thing, we're something different. This idea of verified trees, that's something that we still layer into everything we think about from a marketing standpoint. And so when you see our revenue team's goals, you'll often see points on this idea of like ingredient branding within like category defining marketing within that strategy. Same thing goes for our platform and how we talked about not just being this sort of like broker of relationships from the demand and the supply side. It's like our platform truly needs to elevate the quality of the work that's happening. Where I think the next 3 years are going to be really interesting is how do we expand our total addressable market? I think when we look ahead, our core go-to-market, approach that we've taken over the last 3 years, we still see a lot of runway there. But over the next 5-10 years, we actually believe the opportunity for us is dramatically bigger if we can open the aperture a little bit and use the sort of success and authority we've developed within the restoration and kind of verified tree planting space to step into some of those other areas of impact that I mentioned before. And really, with this idea of creating the infrastructure for impact, how do we get there? How do we create that? And what are the different go-to-market approaches that we can take? So this year, a lot of it is like, don't screw it up, but also validate those opportunities so that we can build the next 3-year strategy.
So maybe double clicking on the don't screw it up. As a founder, what keeps you up at night?
I'd say what keeps me up at night is worrying or believing, like kind of believing that we have, that the assumptions we have made prove to be wrong. Like, I think we as founders, you have to have a lot of conviction with what you're building. You have to have a lot of conviction with where you're headed, and you kind of have to be willing to just run through walls. But I think founders, from the standpoint of most founders I know, tend to operate from a kind of like hyper vigilant mindset of like always looking for the things that are going to prove your assumptions wrong. So that to me is really like I said before, I think we have a lot of runway with our current addressable market. What keeps me up at night is, are we doing the things we need to make sure that not only are we capturing that market share, but we're actually growing the overall pie to make sure that we continue to scale within that addressable market. And then as well, are we doing the things we need to, like I said, open that aperture and make sure that we continue to generate the opportunities that we believe we have in front of us and validate them. So I think it's kind of like, what keeps us up at night is really this idea of like, signal and noise and separating them and knowing that like we truly believe what we're building is inevitable and we're going to run towards it, but always keeping our eye out to make sure that we're validating that at every step.
So in building a business culture is incredibly important. How would you describe your culture in one sentence? And what did you do early on to differentiate from Tentree?
I think I would say our culture is high integrity, but also very high velocity with a low ego. That's kind of the way we like to think about it. For like our starting point for the team we bring on, the people we bring on, how we run the business is just like starting from a place of high integrity. That's the non-starter for us. I think like we're working in the world of trying to build this category, trying to create impact, trying to build this, verifiable approach to it, that only exists if we have the integrity, we bring that integrity to bear. Like the outcome we're chasing is integrity within the market. We have to have that within our business. The thing though that I think we've seen within this space of nature, philanthropy, CSR, ESG as a whole, is we've seen a lot of these businesses that lack the velocity or like the sort of willingness to just run through the walls that are really required and that you often see in the startup space. So for us, like we want to kind of flip the script there of we've got the high integrity, but we also focus on building a culture and a team that is relentless and in building this business and truly believes that we can build something great. And then, finally it's that ego point. It's like, it's not about me. It's not about it's about finding the right problem or the right answer, not necessarily your answer. It's really like we chase truth. We don't, chase being right. It's like we want to find the right answer, and it doesn't matter who brought it up. So everybody's got to have a low ego.
I love that. You don't always find that, especially in technology businesses. So it's a great part of the culture.
And the part of your question I didn't answer was how it differentiates itself, I'd say, from Tentree. I think the Tentree is a much more mature business and it's growing, and I think it will continue to be an incredible business, but it is also not trying to redefine a market. And so I think what also happens is how you build your culture to some extent has to be reflective of where the business is headed. You can't build a really, really hardcore culture that is, relentless and running through walls if every year you're chasing flat growth or, 10% growth, incrementality. For us with Veritree, like that sort of like relentless pursuit of building the platform to create this market and be a category defining company, it just delivers a different sort of like, velocity that's needed.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your fundraising journey. So what was the process like? Any key learnings, any key takeaways for our audience?
For us, I'd say fundraising, we've been relatively fortunate on the fundraising path. We have not necessarily gone out there with necessarily because we really needed that next dollar of growth capital. So for us, we have continually optimized for the right partner at the right stage. We raised a small bit of money when we spun Veritree out. We still have all that cash on our balance sheet from that initial fundraise. The partnership that we entered into with Pender and you all was really just a point of like the evolution of the business, the maturity of the business, and the opportunity to bring in the new partner that could help us on that next stage of the journey, could provide insight and perspective that maybe we didn't have around the table. But it was actually like, if I go in the order of priority, like the dollars or the capital behind it was probably like third or fourth priority. It's obviously really important, but number one for us has always been partnership alignment. We're also trying to build a business in a space that, like I said before, super high integrity. We're trying to build a category creator. And within that, finding the right partner is really important to us as well. So, the climate investment space, or however you want to kind of, box it in, is a really interesting space to be fundraising in at different times. It like anything in venture, it's very much, you kind of like a sock flapping in the wind, or a windsock flapping is like with venture. I think in climates, in a lot of cases that sock is kind of sitting pretty low today. Fortunately for us, fundraising has been more of a function of, finding good partners along the way. And it's because we built a profitable, growing business since day one with good unit economics. And so we've been able to fundraise from a point of strength rather than weakness.
That's fantastic. Yeah, coming from the climate world for many, many years, I definitely hear that. It's an interesting space for sure to be in right now, but it really feels like Veritree has been able to differentiate itself in that category beyond like the broader macro climate today?
We're trying.
And so really, just to wrap up here, a couple personal questions, Derrick. What do you do for fun? I doubt you have much time.
Yeah. Well, we live in Vancouver. We moved our Tentree out here from Saskatchewan back in 2017. Part of it was, Tentree is kind of like an outdoor lifestyle brand, and so we wanted to position it where that market was. And Vancouver, we're super fortunate. The mountains, the ski hills, the ocean. So for us, it's like, and all my business partners too. It's like getting outdoors. We love. I personally love trail running and skiing. We do downhill mountain biking, all those sorts of things whenever we can.
Yes, Vancouver is definitely a place for all of that. That's fantastic. And so we always end our podcast with a book recommendation. What have you read lately that you'd like to share?
My favorite book, it's called How the World Really Works. I don't know if I've got it here. No, I don't. But it's a book by Vaclav Smil. And to me, it like anybody that claims to like be in the climate space or likes thinking about this stuff, it's a must read. It's sort of like a very zoomed out, pragmatic view of how the world works, and using everything from how we're a carbon-based economy and a carbon-based society, and how transition from that would or will happen. And it's just a really like thoughtful perspective on it, where and it's not sort of overly positive or negative. It's just very practical. And so from my perspective, that's been one of my favorite books and one of the ones I like to recommend.
Pender Ventures is a venture capital investor focused on health tech and B2B technology companies at the inflection point between commercialization and scale. As a hands-on, high-conviction investor, Pender Ventures partners closely with founders to accelerate growth and build category-leading businesses. With deep roots in the Canadian innovation ecosystem and the flexibility to invest across North America, the team operates from offices in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary. Learn more at penderventures.com.